December 23, 2010, a security camera in Iowa catches a hooded man buying a hot dog and a single hot lotto ticket. Weeks later, that exact slip hits the $16 million jackpot, but strangely, nobody claims it. For nearly a year, the ticket sits in limbo. Finally, on the literal last day before the ticket expires, a lawyer representing a mysterious offshore trust in Belize tries to claim the cash on behalf of an anonymous client. But Iowa law forbids anonymous payouts. The state demands a name, the lawyer refuses, and the $16 million is forfeited. Investigations later revealed that the anonymous client was the multi-state lottery's own cybersecurity boss. With only a few lines of code, he managed to siphon $24 million in a course of a few years. But how did he do it? To understand how you hack a random number generator like lottery number generators, we first have to ask, what actually is random? We usually define randomness as a lack of pattern or predictability in information and events. Take a double pendulum. We usually think of its motion as unpredictable. But in physics, a double pendulum is what's called a chaotic system. Its behavior depends on a massive number of physical variables: the exact starting angles of the arms, their initial velocities, tiny vibrations, and even microscopic imperfections in the joints. If you had a supercomputer that perfectly understood the exact initial conditions of all those variables, the motion of the double pendulum wouldn't be random at all. It would be purely deterministic. You could calculate its exact position at any moment in time. Randomness, in the physical world, is often just a word for our own ignorance of the initial conditions. So if computers are ultra-deterministic logic machines, how do you force a predictable machine to generate a random number? Well, you have to fake it. In computer science, there is something called a pseudo-random number generator, or a PRNG. It's a self-feeding algorithm. To start it, the computer takes an initial value called a seed. It runs that seed through a complex mathematical meat grinder, shifting bits around and multiplying primes, and spits out a number. Then it takes that generated number, feeds it back into the algorithm as the new seed, and spits out the next number. For example, let's look at JavaScript's native math.random function. If you open a browser console and run it, you get a random-looking decimal. Under the hood, modern browsers use an engine called V8, which generates this number using an algorithm called XOR Shift 128+. It works using two 64-bit internal states. State 0 becomes state 1, and state 1 becomes a new value after a bunch of binary shifting operations. The computer then takes that internal state and converts it into a decimal you can read. It does this using the IEEE 754 floating point standard, extracting the lower 52 bits, known as the mantissa, to output a neat little decimal between 0 and 1. To a human, it looks completely unpredictable. But mathematically, it is entirely locked in. If you know the math and the internal state of the algorithm, you can surely predict the sequence. If we want to predict an algorithm such as math.random, we just need something called an SMT solver, specifically a tool called Z3, created by Microsoft. Z3 is essentially an algebraic crystal ball. Normally in math, you have an equation and you solve for the answer. With an SMT solver, you give it the answer, define the constraints, and the solver works backward to find the unknown variables. If we generate a few random numbers in our browser, we can feed those outputs into a Python script. Z3 takes those decimals, converts them back into mantissas, and reconstructs the hidden 64-bit states inside the V8 engine. Once Z3 cracks those two states, we have perfectly synced our script to the browser's algorithm. If we run our script, it predicts the next number. We go back to the browser, run math.random, and it's the exact same number.
But as you've probably noticed, we're using an older version of Node and V8, but it's for demonstration purposes.
Now, if you can predict a random number on a laptop in a few minutes, imagine what hackers could do to a state lottery. Because PRNGs are inherently predictable, you can never use standard algorithms for cryptography or multi-million-dollar jackpots. Instead, high-security systems use cryptographically secure PRNGs, or even true random number generators. To prevent a hacker from using a solver to predict a sequence, a secure system pulls its initial seed from chaotic physical phenomena outside the computer. They might measure the exact millisecond of radioactive decay in an atom, or the atmospheric static from global lightning strikes. Some institutions and companies, like Cloudflare, literally encrypt web traffic by pointing a camera at a wall of 100 swirling lava lamps, turning those unpredictable, shifting pixels into cryptographic seeds. The Multi-State Lottery Association used a highly secure offline computer to generate their numbers. It was locked in a glass room. It wasn't connected to the internet. Its random number algorithm was seeded by unpredictable hardware data, which, by the way, was gathered using actual quantum physics. Inside the secure draw computers, there was a piece of hardware containing a tiny amount of americium-241, a plutonium radioactive isotope. The computer used a Geiger counter to measure the exact microsecond intervals between decaying radioactive particles. Because radioactive decay is one of the only purely random, unpredictable phenomena in the universe, the computer used those intervals to generate unbreakable, completely random seeds. This system was mathematically unbreakable, but Eddie Tipton knew he couldn't break the cryptography and the physics from the outside, so he didn't try. Late one night in November 2010, Tipton entered the secure draw room. He claimed he was just doing routine maintenance to adjust the computer's clock for daylight savings. The access logs checked out, but cameras that normally recorded every single second of the room suddenly started capturing only 1 frame per minute, a blind spot that Tipton, the head of security, had programmed himself. In those unrecorded gaps, Tipton inserted a USB drive into the lottery computer and installed a custom-built rootkit. A rootkit is a stealthy malware program designed to hijack a system and then delete itself without a trace. Tipton slipped a few extra lines of code directly into the random number generator itself. His secret code was elegantly devious. It sat completely dormant most of the time, acting as a mathematical trapdoor. It was programmed to activate only if 3 specific conditions were met. First, the date had to be May 27th, November 23rd, or December 29th. Second, the day of the week had to be a Wednesday or a Saturday. Third, the draw had to occur after 8 p.m. If all 3 conditions were met, the rootkit hijacked the generator. It told the computer to ignore the secure, unpredictable hardware entropy and instead use a very specific, hard-coded seed that Tipton had programmed himself. The machine was still doing the math perfectly, but Tipton had rigged the starting line. He knew exactly what seed the computer was going to use, which meant all he had to do was go home, open his own laptop, type in the date and time of the upcoming draw, and run the algorithm. But here is the problem. In high-security systems, you can't just change a file and get away with it. The lottery computers were subjected to a daily security audit using a cryptographic hash function, specifically SHA-1. A hash is like a digital fingerprint. If even a single byte of code in a file is changed, its hash fingerprint changes completely. The security team runs a daily script to check the lottery software's fingerprint. If it doesn't perfectly match the original, alarms immediately go off. Tipton knew about this daily check because he designed it, so he programmed his rootkit to act like a bouncer holding a fake ID. When the daily security audit requested the file to scan its fingerprints, Tipton's rootkit intercepted the request. Instead of letting the scanner look at the infected file, the rootkit redirected the scanner to look at a pristine, unhacked backup copy of the file hidden elsewhere on the hard drive. The scanner saw the perfect, unchanged fingerprint, reported that everything was secure, and moved on. It was the perfect inside job. Or at least it would have been if he hadn't gotten greedy. When the $16 million payout was denied and the investigation launched, digital forensics teams tore the lottery computers apart. They discovered that on one single machine Tipton had programmed, his malicious code failed to self-delete. A suspicious file was left behind. For that reason, investigators were able to find the hard-coded dates. Armed with those specific dates, November 23rd, December 29th, May 27th, authorities combed through unsolved lottery mysteries across the country, and the results were staggering. In 2005, a Colorado jackpot on November 23rd was won by Tipton's brother, Tommy. In 2007, a Wisconsin jackpot on December 29th was won by an LLC controlled by Tipton's friend, Robert Rhodes. Tipton was using his friends and family as a way to throw off any suspicions, as he couldn't draw the lotteries himself. It would raise some questions. 5 states were implicated in total, and the fraud amounted to roughly $24 million. In 2017, faced with a mountain of digital evidence, Eddie Tipton confessed and was sentenced to 25 years in prison.